Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. And one of the big areas that has been transformed over the last 12 months is education. Many have been forced to go from learning in a classroom to learning remotely. Suddenly, they found themselves working beyond the traditional IT infrastructure. And there was a whole heap of new equipment required to make it a success. Teachers were challenged with adopting new technology and teaching in a different way. And equally, parents were thrown in at the deep end and expected to be a teaching resource as well as a parent. But what about the technology and the tech partners involved that all work together to help make it all a success in just a couple of weeks, really? And after learning more about how Citrix and Wacom have been working together to ensure this transition was so much easier, I felt compelled to share that story with you all. So come and join me in conversation with Todd from Citrix and Mindy from Wacom and learn more about the challenge that they helped overcome as learning went from the classroom to learning remotely. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So thanks for having me today, Neil, and welcome to everyone joining on the podcast. My name is Todd Smith. I'm a sales engineering manager at Citrix, but my secondary role is as an education evangelist. Been with Citrix now it'll be 15 years coming up in February, so pretty long period of time to be here. I've had a variety of different roles, but one of the things that really intrigues me is the education space in general, and how much of an impact Citrix and our partners can have on delivering education to both the K through 12 space as well as the higher education. So thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure having you here, Todd. And we also have Mindy on the podcast today. So Mindy, could you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself too?
Thanks for having us. I'm Mindy Thielges. I work in enterprise and education sales at Wacom. But beyond just working at Wacom, I'm also an evangelist for digital pen and ink technologies in education. And that's why I'm so proud to be involved in Wacom's growing education initiatives across K-12 and higher education. And before I joined Wacom, I spent about 15 years working in career and technical education. I supported teachers to find ways that they could best use technology in their classrooms. I even learned new and emerging teaching tools right alongside with them, like designing with 3D printers. And so I created professional development so that those teachers could be confident using those tools during class. I also spent many of my Saturdays helping teachers across the country run their school's robotic competitions. And over the years, the most important thing for me is seeing how technology in schools can help connect students with each other and with their teachers so that learning environments become a place that sparks creativity and inspires students in their journeys.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Mindy, I would also imagine that when most people think of Wacom, they think about creative tools such as interactive pen displays, pen tablets and apps, etc. But I suspect there's so much more to what you guys do than that. So can I ask that you maybe set the scene and tell the listeners a little bit more about the kind of work that you do in the education industry?
Oh, yeah, sure. So you are so right. I mean, this was also my preconceived notion, even as a reseller for Wacom before I came on board. I had the same mindset, and that mindset was that most people associate Wacom with a company that makes drawing tablets for artists to use, and that it's used in schools for those aspiring artists to use. So a creative professional working for Disney or Pixar, or like an engineer that's working with computer-aided design applications, those are the Wacom customers. That's what I thought too. What most people don't realize is that the underlying technologies that are used with lots and lots and lots of other applications go way beyond that, including signature. So one of the biggest right now, though, is within education. So that same technology that an animator is using, the Wacom pen technology is also being used by chemistry teachers, by math teachers, so they can create and deliver their lessons. And for a long time, Wacom did have a custom and still has a custom built line of what we call our podium display, which is used at the front of the classroom. So basically, any instructor could walk up and teach face-to-face with their students while they're writing on this pen display, looking out at the students, engaging with them. And that same content would be up on a big whiteboard behind them or projected. Now, we know that right now, if teachers are doing this, and many still are, they're teaching to empty classrooms and teaching like, hello, the camera's on, and you're teaching that way. We're working with a lot of teachers now that are using our compact size interactive pen displays. So they do this very same thing. So it's really, really cool to be part of this huge education movement because I had been doing this for so many years.
Love that, Mindy. Really brings to life what you do there. And Todd, as an ex-IT guy, I would imagine that most people will associate Citrix with a world of big business, servers, applications, desktop virtualization, networking, etc., but not necessarily education. So, Todd, can you tell me a little bit more about the role that Citrix plays in actually enabling educators?
Yeah, so that brings up a great question, Neil. And Citrix looks at education as another use case. And traditionally, it's been delivering applications to users that are remote or consumers of those applications who happen to be remote. They may be on different types of devices. The traditional thing is, how do I deliver a Windows app to a Macintosh device or a Mac OS? And those are something that we've been doing for many years, for over 30 years. We've been in the focus around application delivery. And it's really not that much different when you're talking about delivering a desktop. As Mindy was talking about, these are the creators of the future. And oftentimes they're having to use applications out there such as SolidWorks and some of the graphic intense applications that they would traditionally go to a computer lab in the school to use. And now they can't go to the school. They can't physically go to that location, but they still need to have access to those tools and services and applications. And one of the things we do is we enable that. But we also enable it securely so that we don't have the risk of students having to pass down the information down to their endpoint or their local machine and run the risk of potential malware or a variety of different security risks associated with that. So that's kind of where Citrix has been focusing. We're shifting a little bit of focus around towards education, but we see it as an extension of our existing use cases and all of our experience as well.
I love hearing stories like that and the kind of role that Citrix is playing there in education, because like I said, it's something you don't automatically associate with Citrix. So all the more reason to get that story out there. But Mindy, I'd love to take you both back to last year when the world was a very different place. And to begin with, from a Wacom point of view, Mindy, can you tell me more about the challenges that you had to overcome as learning went from the traditional classroom to the home?
Yeah, so for myself, I mean, I kind of got it, but like talking about what Todd was saying with that endpoint and how Citrix fits in, we have this use case of annotation, not necessarily artistic use case, but annotation, which is a huge part of the teaching tool and delivery and engagement and learning outcomes. So a huge hurdle for the vast majority of the teachers was that they were sent home without their infrastructure. They were sent home without that lab that Todd was talking about that might have had the SolidWorks at every desktop, right? And in those labs, a lot of times there's a Wacom right there. So teachers couldn't just bring those home. So they had to figure out how to find the tools to support them. And another thing, it's really hard to lecture online the way you do in person. So they had both, like, they have to figure out how to use the technology and how to teach online. Some had not ever done that. Some did not participate in any kind of flex model or hybrid model or virtual teaching model at all before they came to us and needed help. So teachers were redesigning these classes if they weren't already set up for them to teach remotely. And then the IT managers had to scramble to find the best solution and find it really quick. So Wacom, thankfully, already had for many years partners like Citrix that came in because that desktop, that virtual desktop, could be that essential teaching tool, and is actually the essential teaching tool at the dining room table. Still, many teachers didn't know about how easy it is to implement Wacom as your drawing tablet, your pen to engage with your students as a math teacher, chemistry teacher, social studies. You only need to look to all the humorous videos on YouTube for evidence of that. And I mean, I really applaud the teachers for their makeshift solutions. And I know that, having a sense of humor to post about it during such crazy times is crazy in and of itself. I mean, they were in on the joke too. They're like, look at what I'm having to do. I'm teaching at home. I've got dogs barking. I've got, I'm trying to use a makeshift whiteboard and it's mirrored with Zoom. Oh my gosh, what am I doing? So the market has changed in demand for Wacom, but Wacom always had this tool, this use case of annotating with Wacom, whether you're in a class or at home. So this just makes teaching easier. It makes it more fun. And being that it's Citrix ready for the virtual desktops is huge. So, we're excited. I mean, the logic is you cannot tote home a big giant whiteboard in your car when you're being shut down for a pandemic. So it's like, get me a Wacom, get me one now. I need it now. And it's not just a temporary fix. This is our focus, for the future. We're so ready. And I think that with these flex model solutions we have, virtual online teaching tools we have, we're going to be in it for a very, very long time.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Mindy, because I've seen some of those videos of the whiteboards at home that have gone on Zoom, all the best intentions, and then the students can't just read it, can they?
Yeah.
And Todd, from a Citrix point of view, how did you respond to that need from educators who were faced with providing the ability to learn from anywhere when they've been taken outside of their own infrastructure?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting question here, because how did we respond, or more importantly, how did customers respond to the immediate shift to work from home or learn from home or teach from home? Most businesses that we found had disaster recovery or business continuity plans in place. So it was merely a matter of enabling part of that. Most school districts and most education customers don't have a disaster recovery plan. They don't have a business continuity plan. So they were left scrambling. They were grabbing whatever devices they could to bring home with the teachers. The students were oftentimes left without devices, or they were sharing devices with mom or dad or their siblings or their peers, or they were getting and borrowing devices from other family members and things like that. So the challenge there was how do customers and how do the school districts and the institutions basically deliver across the board to everyone the applications, the desktops, and the services, so that there is digital equity there, and in meaning that every student has the ability to learn and participate in classroom discussions or in lab environments and things like that. So one of the big challenges that we faced was around things like making sure that the education institutions were able to have access and spinning up a Citrix environment very quickly for the ones that didn't have it, or extending out to the customers that already did have an existing environment. Oftentimes in education, the Citrix environments were very limited. They were specific around a class, or they were oftentimes back for the administrative side of the house. So a lot of that was a challenge. The other piece of the challenge was around security. If you're going to be using a shared device, and if you're going to be using mom and dad's laptop when they're working from home as well, how do you make sure that there is no cross connections that occur, or data leakage that would occur between the student's environment and the parent's environment, or the siblings' environments as well. So there was a lot of challenges around there. the biggest challenge, and Mindy mentioned it earlier about the challenges of physical spaces and being able to make sure that students have the resources, the teachers have the resources as well, and little things like when you're presenting on a camera, sometimes the images behind you show up reverse, and that's one challenge. The second challenge is around how do you, especially in the K through 12 or even the K through 3, which is where the students really learn things like penmanship and how to write and draw and do things like that. How do you do that on a keyboard, right? It's very hard to do that, and everything from writing it on a sheet of paper and holding it up in front of the camera to show the work. Well, how does the teacher actually interact with the student, do corrections, and do more of the show and tell aspects of it? And speaking of working from home or learning from home, you get some of the best responses out of those kindergartners and first graders when they say that, when they tell the teacher that, wow, Miss Kelleher, you've got a really messy room that you're teaching us from. Or you hear the dogs barking in the background, and that spins off to a 15-minute conversation within the class of what's your dog's name and what kind of dog is he? And the answers to there are, well, I've got a brown dog, is a classic example. So we've had a lot of these challenges, and really some of it is the infrastructure gaps that are out there, some of the networking gaps, some of the digital equity gaps that are out there as well. And really, it looks like we're going to continue to have some of these challenges moving forward. There is going to be a hybrid teaching model that is probably going to come out of this. And part of that is, the hybrid model is not only on the technology side, but it's also on the way the educators are preparing their curriculum and delivering the curriculum as well.
Love that. And I think it's easy to forget as well that many of these changes and challenges happened in just a couple of weeks. And it was so crazy to think how quickly everyone had to adapt and just throw away everything that they knew and find a different way around this particular problem or set of problems. And I would imagine that many automatically went into panic buying mode, attempting to buy things that they didn't necessarily understand. So, Mindy, how did you help your customers go through that journey?
Yeah, for me, I was on a little vacation right at the beginning of March. So I literally was trying to get back to work, hoping I would make it back from London. Almost didn't. I mean, I was watching the flights just cancel. And I was thinking, oh, I could be working remotely. I'm good. I got my Wacom and my laptop. But so most customers didn't know just how easy it is to plug in a Wacom pen display and use it with just about any software application. So in that panic buying mode was, okay, I need to do something other than write on a piece of paper and point a camera at it. That's not working for me. Okay, I'm going to get this Wacom pen display, but does it work with X, Y, or Z software application? So being able to just say yes, it will is very powerful. So if you go find the ink in the application, like the most common question was, okay, I'm going to use this Wacom, but will it work with that Zoom whiteboard I just found, because I just got set up with my Zoom account. What the heck is happening here? Yes, if you go find the ink in any application, it'll work almost all the time. So that was the most common question during the panic buying mode. So we had this new influx of customers that were, part of massive district-wide or university-wide Zoom subscriptions that they had just set up, or whatever other web meeting software that they were using. And then they were bringing their laptops home and then the pen display. So it was something. So because the teachers were sent home without, much plan of a tech infrastructure, and there was no, plan for a pandemic, we have a lot of teachers that are teachers, but they're not tech experts. So that there was that gap there, and it was great to be able to deliver a solution and continue to. So I spent a lot of time showing them on the fly that, yes, it will work. We would set up a Zoom meeting just to show them, my home office and show them how to use it. So that really helped. I think that a teacher sent home with a full class of 30 or more students, and that's just one class. They may teach hundreds of students a day, that they were finding that the students were not as engaged on Zoom, even I'll go so far as to say bored. There wasn't enough interaction. You have got all these interruptions that could happen, a lawnmower, a dog barking, cat meowing, or laying on the laptop or whatever. So did the teacher have enough brain space to do all of this, to do their job? And keeping them engaged with the digital ink really became a focus point for those customers choosing, our emergency remote kit setup. You don't really have to be a tech expert to do it. You need to find intuitive tools, have a trusted environment like a Citrix environment, fire up your Zoom, and then you can go back to teaching. Even when we go back to the classroom, there have been so many structural shifts. We all knew flipped classrooms were here. We all knew that online teaching was becoming more prevalent, but now it's playing a greater role in classrooms, probably permanently. So it's truly a seismic shift. We better not have a big earthquake coming. So I want to knock wood and even saying that. What next? So an example of a university that kind of got the idea quickly, what they did is they were having to go back and forth. They were trying out, teaching in class, and then boom, somebody gets COVID and it's shut down. So what they did is they went for that podium solution. It's a larger pen display. It's a 24-inch that we had been selling for 10 years in this podium space. They bought those with a 1-to-1 ratio of a compact pen display that's a 10.1-inch one, so that they could quickly go back and forth. So whether lockdown or, teaching in some hybrid way, we all have a really good solution to share with educators so they can focus on pedagogy instead of the technology.
And you made a great point there, Mindy, talking about that you don't need to be a tech expert to get it all up and working. I think that's so important because schools, colleges and universities and the people in there are not IT experts by their trade. They're educators. So, Todd, presumably you saw a lot of that at Citrix too, right?
Yes, we did. And we saw, we saw this kind of expanded into situations where a lot of times the teachers, and especially in the K-12, the elementary schools and middle schools, where they were relying heavily on the students to help them troubleshoot everything from connectivity issues to how to use Google Meet or how to use some of the tools that they were being asked to use to deliver, the content in the curriculum. We saw an awful lot of this in a couple of ways, right? So students were being sent home with a device that may not be familiar to them. They were being asked to convert from a traditional Mac or over to a Chromebook, as an example, or an iPad, a touchscreen tablet form factor, and that caused a little bit of stress. The good thing is that most kids and most students are very resilient, and they learn very quickly. They learned much quicker than the teachers did, and also the parents did, because you think about it, the parents became the educational IT support mechanisms for a lot of the students that are out there. But they're very resourceful, and we saw everything from school districts that were sending out videos of how to log into your new Citrix environment, how to log into your school's portal. And be secure. How does multi-factor authentication work in a secure environment? Where can you save documents? What are some of the best practices? Some of the school districts that we've seen send out weekly IT updates, and it's a quick little video, 5 to 10 minutes in length, giving them ideas on how to be safe while you're remotely learning, how to avoid what happens when someone joins a Zoom meeting that shouldn't really be there. How do you protect your data? How do you protect yourself while you're online? And also, how to submit documents. How do you make sure that you can contact your teachers? One of the big things that we've seen is the increasing amount of availability and accessibility of some of these teachers, and all the way up to the professor levels, where we've heard that they've been able to increase office hours because they've eliminated their commute back and forth to the campus, and saying, hey, if it usually takes me 2 hours round trip, that's 2 hours I can spend in my office coaching and helping students understand the content. So really, there's been a shift. And a lot of the schools and a lot of the districts have done a phenomenal job of being a little bit more adaptable and adaptive towards their education needs, and treating their students as part of the structure instead of a consumer of the structure.
And like I said a few moments ago, much of this was thrust upon teachers within a couple of weeks, really. And obviously they were incredibly stressed. So I'm curious, can you share how you made both your services more intuitive and ready for teachers to help maybe boost their confidence when they needed it, especially when so many were already under pressure?
So that's a really great question, and a really great perspective for this of how do you rapidly adapt and make it more intuitive. Citrix for years has had the challenge of a different application or a different client for each type of device. So we several years ago we started with consolidating our client infrastructure down into a single app, right? And that app is available on all of the different marketplaces, whether it be the App Store, the Google Marketplace, the Microsoft store that's out there, or you can download it from the Citrix site. But really, what it is, you're getting that single consistent experience from an application. That means I don't have to worry about, am I on a Chromebook or am I on a Macintosh or a Windows PC? It's going to look and act the same way, right? The screen layout may be slightly different, but from a perspective of the user, it's not going to change significantly for that. So that's the first thing. Make it a consistent user experience. Make sure that when adding in security and adding in additional authentication mechanisms, we're not making it more complex for the user to go through. The other big thing is updates need to be seamless, right? They don't need to worry about, am I on the right version? On the back end where the services are delivered, we want to make sure that those are always updated, that they're not having to worry about outages, that there's proper load balancing between the devices, so one server doesn't get overloaded and things like that. Reliability and resiliency of the services that we're delivering are critical. We also found additional use cases that make it more intuitive, right? If a person is used to working on a Windows-based PC, and this is especially important with the lab environments, if they're connecting to a specific device, make sure that's a seamless experience, right? So that they know that they can connect to this lab device because that has the resources that they need to have and need to interact with. Also, what happens when you get disconnected? I want to be able to reconnect immediately, right? So that's all intuitive capabilities that are built into our product, and more importantly, getting the support mechanism around how to use our products, right? So being able to make sure that there are support forums, that you don't have to call into tech support for every single question that you may have, readily available documentation and how-to guides and user guides that are very much geared towards the individual user, not the administrator. And then finally, being able to get feedback from the customers as well as their end users on how things are going. Are they working properly? Are you meeting your expectations? What would you like to fix? So gathering that pulse of what it's like to be a user when you're brand new into this. How do you gather that information, and how do you make sure that goes into the next product improvements? So making it more intuitive is absolutely critical for this.
Love that. And Mindy, presumably you had to go through similar challenges as well to make the products more intuitive and put the teachers at ease.
Yeah, the teachers being at ease is key. And how we boost their confidence is we show them something that has already been working in these environments for quite some time. It's just the knowledge of of getting that to them that it has worked for some time. I'll use an adjunct professor as an example. So often an adjunct professor, they have a full-time job and then they need to go and teach at a university or design school or what have you, trade school. So that adjunct professor that might have been at their corporate job all day, working remotely, that now must create a syllabus and lesson content, helping them and showing them that they can use the same applications, whether they're on a Citrix environment or not, and then move into those applications for annotating with or brainstorming with during their day job. And then moving into lesson content and delivery there's so many applications out there, just knowing that they can find the ink and teach with that and use the pen even as a mouse. You don't have to ink if you don't want to. Really helps them feel confident that they can do this in this mostly remote world. And then in the future, in both situations in person. It's a consistent experience, just like with if you're going to use the Citrix single app at a university, you can still trust that will work in any environment.
Excellent. And I think we're all starting to reflect on what happened in 2020 and how we all had to adjust, because we've all been on that same journey. And I think to some degree, we're all starting to think differently and change how we work, teach, learn, and even relax. But can I ask you, share how you're going to help your customers continue to evolve and explore that art of the possible that comes with new ways of doing things? And Todd, I'll put that one to you first.
Sure. So one of the things that we at Citrix have been doing for the past 2 years is really rethinking what we call the future of work. And the future of work could be morphed into the future of education just as easily as the future of work, because we are exploring opportunities to make changes in the way we conduct ourselves on a daily basis, right? And part of it is around 3 basic principles: organizing, guiding, and automating, right? So if we take a look at organizing, I want to go to one place. I want to go to one workspace that's going to allow me to have access to all my applications, my data, my services, and whatever else I need to get my job done. In this case, the job could be a manufacturing job, it could be a financial services job, it could be a teaching job, or it could be a learning job as well. Being able to take that and put it in one place that is secure, that we can get rich analytics out of it and things like that, right? So organizing is the first key pillar. The second key pillar on this is guiding, right? Very often processes are in place, whether we're in business or whether we're in education, where you have to do a certain amount of things every day, and there's tasks. So think about it as the way you interact with a LinkedIn or Facebook, where you get a feed of things that are interesting to you based on who you are, or what in education, what classes you're taking, or what grade level you're in, or what school you go to. There's a certain amount of information that's going to come through in a feed approach. And then the final pillar is around automating. Right? There are certain things that we do every single day that should be they're just ripe to be automated. Doing things like having a student check in, and because they've checked in, they've gone and gone into the grade book for attendance and things like that. The teacher shouldn't have to take time to go through that and collect each piece of information when it's already readily available. What if we could pass that information on, let the teacher just go and click and say, yes, they're all the students are accounted for, they're in my class, and then pass that on to the administration for things like, think of it as the absentee list or the tardy list. Those are things that should be automated, right? There's a lot of other things that should be automated as well. And we go back to the labs that are utilized by students. What happens when the student leaves the lab, right? What has to happen to that lab piece of equipment that they're using, or that virtual equipment that they're using? Well, it has to be refreshed, it has to be cleaned up and things like that. Those are some things that could be automated as well. From an overall perspective, we've got the analytics piece of it to really understand what is happening, what's happening from a security aspect, what's happening from a performance aspect, and more importantly, what's happening from the experience, right? How is the student experience when they're coming in from home different from when they're coming in from a library or from a Boys and Girls Club or from their dorm room on campus or when they're remote, right? So, as Mindy mentioned with the adjunct professors, most of them have full-time jobs or they're working and doing other things while they're teaching. They're not full-time professors. They're actually working throughout that. How do we make sure that their experience is very similar and they're not suffering from any downgrade of that experience? What it's allowing us to also do is rethink the way we interact with students and with our customers. It's becoming much more collaborative. It's becoming much more point-to-point communications. We're relying a lot on audio and video conferencing capabilities. And that needs to be pervasive, right? You need to be able to quickly do a video chat with some of your classmates or your professor or a teaching assistant. You want to be able to do that. It's going to fundamentally change the way education works. And we need to be able to not only look at it from the lens of the student, the consumer of the education services, but also from the folks in the lens of the people who are delivering those services. And it's not just the faculty, it's also the staff, and it's also the administration, right? Because, admissions counselors are not going out and doing home visits as much as they were in the past, right? You need to be able to do that. You need to be able to secure documents. You need to be able to provide that great experience. And it all starts with having that vision of this is an opportunity to rethink the way we're delivering education, the way we're constructing the curriculum, and the way we're looking at what do the students need to learn to be successful coming out of the programs.
Completely agree with you there, Todd. So many great points. And Mindy, presumably many of your clients as well are going to be looking at lessons learned from last year and looking to tweak and improve the way that they do things. So how are you helping them on that journey?
One great thing about Wacom is its creative background. And what this means is that the art of what is possible has been at the core of Wacom's identity for nearly 40 years now. And to just look at what is that art of the possible within Wacom itself as a company? I mean, Wacom started with just a couple engineers in a garage in Japan, and they believe that the importance of using a pen to communicate doesn't go away with computers, but instead it grows. And so for educators, we're planning lots of programs to really show them what the best and the brightest are doing, and then giving students and teachers the tools they need to create it themselves. So working with our partners like Citrix and leaders in the education space, we're very much hard at work helping them find the art of what is possible by inspiring students, their communities, maybe even innovate new teaching pedagogy into the future. I mean, the art of possible is sort of limitless, right? And we invest in these new tools to make education better ourselves. So we have our newest software called Wacom Notes, which allows users to write digital notes and make them searchable. And that kind of R&D investment in the next generation of solutions is critical to continuing to support our customers. And just to go beyond the classroom for a moment, we want to show people that the impact of mastering a pen display can go way beyond the classroom. So you can use the same tools to organize anything you want. You can collaborate with anyone you want, get research published, take part in a community endeavor, create an exchange program with students, join a book club, diagram, vision board, a vacation, even take an art class. And so in our view, technology should enable engagement and creativity and not create barriers. So a pen display is just one way of doing that with Wacom.
Fantastic. And we have heard about the great work that both Wacom and Citrix are doing. But I'm curious, can you tell me a little bit more about how you're working together? Because I think there's a pretty cool story here too. And Todd, if I throw that to you first.
Sure. So Citrix for many years has had what's called the Citrix Ready program, which is really designed for our partners to coordinate and collaborate with Citrix to make sure that the products work seamlessly and deliver a seamless experience to the users, regardless of configurations and things like that, right? And that comes about through testing. It comes about through some joint research and joint development activities. And when a customer or educator deploy a Wacom solution in their Citrix infrastructure, they can rest assured of this seamless deployment has been tested and validated, and continues to be updated as we go. So quickly, if you want to learn more about the Citrix Ready program, if you go to citrixready.citrix.com, and if you search for Wacom in there, you'll see how the information and how it works together. And more importantly, how you can expand your existing environment using both Citrix and Wacom as partners to make sure that you're delivering the best experience, and not only an experience, but also the ability to have an alternative to just using a traditional keyboard and mouse solution. Adopting the pen capabilities and the capabilities that Mindy was talking about is absolutely critical, especially in education. You're talking about graphics. You're talking about, especially in the earlier grades. Being able to use a pen for a kindergartner is huge, and being able to leverage that as a technology, as a learning tool, is pretty impactful.
And Mindy, on that Citrix Wacom relationship, what is it that you'd like to share with everyone listening today?
Sure. So Wacom has been on the Citrix Ready certified compatible partner list for quite some time as a peripheral. And that it includes education, but also includes signature too. So our education customers can continue to count on us because we're involved in ongoing testing with all the applications. There are so many new cloud-based applications that have popped up and come up as rising stars in the education space. So as the education environments continue to change rapidly, and they will, we further build on our partnership with Citrix so that those teachers that are out there can be rest assured that when they use Wacom Pen technology, they can count on using a virtual desktop at their dining room table, or if they've upgraded to find a room that's just their teaching room in their house, they can do it with confidence.
Love it. Well, thank you so much to both of you for taking the time to come on and share your stories with me today on the podcast. But before I do let you go, first of all, Todd, can you remind the listeners of where they can find more information about Citrix online, and contact your team if they have any questions, if we do have any educators or, in fact, any business out there wanting to find out more?
Sure. The best place to reach anyone at Citrix is right off our main website, www.citrix.com. There are information there about use cases as well as industry vertical situations, and there's a button on the bottom that will bring you directly to contact a sales rep or an account executive.
And Mindy, I'm sure you've got lots of products and services that are going to appeal to a lot of educators and beyond next year as people start working differently and learning differently. What's the best way of finding you?
Okay, you can find Wacom at wacom.com. We have a community page. It's community.wacom.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Mindy Thielges. Twitter is Mindy Thielges. It's spelled Thielges because no one spells it right, which I totally understand. I don't either. And then I have an email address. I do answer emails. So mindy.thielges@wacom.com.
Like I said early in the podcast, I think so many people have been on a journey over the last 12 months. And when we do think of the world of education, we don't automatically think about technology, infrastructure, services, and products. The children are quite au fait with them, and it's the teachers that have been on quite a journey here. But thank you so much for sharing your stories. I think your words will resonate with so many educators listening, but more than anything, just thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
What I loved about this interview is how everyone has been on a journey together. Parents, students, teachers, schools, universities. And it was technology that brought them all together. And I especially love how both Citrix and Wacom work together to make it all possible. So I cannot thank Todd and Mindy enough for coming on the podcast today and sharing that with us. But I invite you to do the same. Please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. I'd love to hear the challenges that you've had to overcome, especially with remote learning and the technology and the good things, the bad things, whatever it might be. Keep those messages coming in. But that's it for this episode. So all that's left for me to say is a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.